Yesterday in Albany, there were simultaneous dueling rallies at the state capitol. Corrections officers gathered and chanted outside, audible to Governor Hochul's office on the second floor. Inside, just hundreds of feet away, former incarcerated people and other inmate advocates held a rally of their own. Both sides are seeking change in New York State's prison system, a system that appears to be in full-blown crisis, with the CO strike in its third week. We visit both rallies on today's Story of the Day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com. And the Devlin Inn and Suites, Lake Placid, welcoming families, athletes, and groups to the Olympic Village, offering Adirondack mountain views and dog-friendly accommodations. TheDevlinNY.com.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Wednesday, March 5th. Let's start at the corrections officers' rally outside the state capitol. State officials say 2,000 corrections officers returned to work after Governor Hochul offered a deal to end the unlawful CO strike last Friday. But more than 8,000 COs remain on the picket line, and hundreds of them took their demands to Albany, a strong rebuke to that tentative deal. Jung-Yoon Han reports for the New York Public News Network.
Corrections officers and Republican lawmakers said the deal did little to address concerns over work conditions in the state's prisons. They say it also doesn't fully repeal the Hall Act, which sets limitations on the use of solitary confinement. So they rallied on the east side of the Capitol in Albany to send a message to lawmakers that they'll hold the line and continue what's an illegal strike until a better solution comes along. At the center of the rally was Michael Sussman, a civil rights lawyer who served as an MC of the event.
There are many, many issues that are not even broached, let alone rightfully addressed in the agreement.
Joe Brink, who works at Otisville Correctional Facility in Orange County, was choked by an incarcerated person in 2023 and sustained an umbilical hernia because of it. He says he loves his job, but is participating in the strike because he doesn't think the state and the Department of Corrections is doing enough to keep corrections officers safe.
How am I supposed to, sit there and still want to stand and fight for this department when the department made it clear they turned it back on me?
A corrections union spokesperson said most prisons in the western part of the state are still affected, including Elmira, Attica, and Wendy correctional facilities. In Albany, I'm Jung-Yoon Han for the New York Public News Network.
Meanwhile, at the same time, inside the Capitol, a smaller group held a rally about safety concerns for prisoners. They were advocating for more prison reform and an end to systemic violence in New York prisons. Since corrections officers began striking on February 17th, 7 incarcerated people have died. That includes a 22-year-old who was reportedly beaten to death by CEOs at Mid-State Correctional near Utica on Saturday. Amy Feiereisel reports.
The rally was attended by formerly incarcerated people, advocates, and legislators sponsoring bills to create alternative pathways home for inmates. Thomas Gant served a 25-year sentence for murder in New York prisons. He's now a community organizer at the Center for Community Alternatives.
We are here because our loved ones are being brutalized, starved, isolated, and murdered in New York State prisons. We are here because we refuse to let the suffering go unseen.
People held up posters cut in the shape of tombstones, lettered with the names of incarcerated people who have died in prison. Some of those posters said, "Justice for Messiah Nantwi."
This weekend, another incarcerated person was killed by prison guards. This time, it was 22-year-old Messiah.
Messiah Nantwi was pronounced dead on Saturday at a hospital near Mid-State Correctional Facility. While state and prison officials have not released details about Nantwi's death, a prison spokesperson confirmed that 11 staff members from Mid-State have been placed on administrative leave and that the death is under investigation. The New York Times interviewed 9 prisoners from Mid-State who said that Nantwi was brutally beaten by corrections officers. Gant made the connection between Nantwi's death and that of Robert Brooks in December.
Just a few months ago, Robert Brooks was tortured to death just across the street at Marcy Correctional Facility. The same happened to Ed Schultz, Leonard Strickland, Carl Taylor, Samuel Harrell, and so many others.
Assemblymember Anna Kellis, who represents Tompkins County and parts of Cortland County, said that corrections officers aren't being held accountable for their actions.
They murdered someone. That is against the law. They're not in jail. They're working in jail. That's not right.
Ongoing strikes by corrections officers have left incarcerated people with limited or no access to family and lawyer visits, programs, food, medicine, and medical care. And since they began, the New York Times reports that at least 7 prisoners have died. 1 has been ruled a suicide, and at least 3 involved men found unresponsive in their cells and may have occurred due to a lack of medical attention. Corrections officers have said they're striking because staffing levels are dangerously low in prisons, and they fear for their safety due to changes made to solitary confinement by the HALT Act. Advocates and the legislators that passed the HALT Act say solitary confinement is inhumane, and that corrections officers often threaten the safety of the incarcerated.
You should not have to be lucky to make it home from prison.
Assemblymember John Zaccaro represents part of the Bronx.
Enough is enough. Enough is enough. You shouldn't have to be lucky to receive justice.
Zaccaro and other legislators called for the passage of more prison reform laws, including ones that would allow judges more flexibility in sentencing, parole for elderly prisoners, and ways for incarcerated people to earn time off from their sentences. They also called for the HALT Act to be fully implemented. Amy Feiereisel, North Country Public Radio.
New York State lawmakers are setting their priorities ahead of the April 1st budget deadline. Republican representatives from the North Country say they want to see more state spending on infrastructure projects like roads and sewer systems. Aaron Shello-Levine of the New York Public News Network has that story.
Governor Kathy Hochul proposed a $252 billion budget in January. In the coming days, one House versions of the budget will be released. Republican Assemblyman Matt Simpson of the 114th District says he'll be pushing for an increase in the Environmental Protection Fund.
I think it's important to work on these resiliency projects that we need in the face of, the weather that we're getting. Our infrastructure is inadequately supported right now, and we're going to see bigger losses down the road if we don't spend the money now. It's going to be more costly down the road when we do have the funds to address these issues. And there's no more important investment than in infrastructure, clean water and wastewater, and that's part of the EPF.
Hochul's proposed budget centers her so-called affordability agenda. The Democrat proposed increasing the state child tax credit to nearly $1,000 per child under the age of 4 and tax rebate checks. 112th District Assemblywoman Mary Beth Walsh, a Republican, says she's concerned with ballooning spending.
And I think that's really risky when you look at the whole picture, federal plus state, and how that's all going to work out. So I'm calling for austerity. The governor may want to make points to say, I recognize the affordability crisis and I want to give you money back. But, a one-off like that might not be a smart move. So I hope that they're going to factor that discussion in as they come up with the final budget.
Republican State Senator Dan Steck represents the 45th District. He's concerned with the size and priorities of the proposal, which will ultimately be hashed out by the governor and Democrats who control the legislature.
We're spending 5 times as much money on the MTA as we are on our local roads, and 87% of our state highways are local and county controlled roads. The public sees that, business owners see that, the people that are paying the taxes are seeing that, and then we wonder why we have an out-migration problem. So, until we get back to the basics, what are the basics? Hey, we need to have good physical infrastructure. Of course, we need to make sure we have a good education system, and we need to have good health care.
Assemblywoman Carrie Warner supports the governor's rebate checks, but the Democrat from the 113th District adds she'd like the state to be more analytical in its approach to affordability.
I'm looking for things like paying down the remaining unemployment insurance debt that comes out of the pandemic. No more surcharges for our small businesses.
A spokesperson for the governor says she is committed to putting forward, quote, a balanced budget that will bring costs down while continuing to make smart investments in the services and programs New Yorkers depend on, end quote. In Saratoga Springs, I'm Aaron Shello-Levine for the New York Public News Network.
We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Ben Sharon of Watertown and Danny Thomas of Canton. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.